What is up, guys? Happy Wednesday. Really special episode for you today with my own mentor, a guy who's had a huge influence on my life. He is coming back to the podcast because we were not done after his first episode. So Robert J. Hill, talking about finding your why, getting clarity on running a purpose-driven business. He has helped my business so much. We've mentioned this many times, but my client relationships are better. My work-life balance is better. My clarity on my vision, my mission, my values, my brand, everything. I after my mentorship with Robert, I went to go redesign my website, and it all just feels right and feels like me and feels like our vision for business, which is really cool. We recorded this episode live in the Facebook group weeks before this is coming out on the podcast. So togfb.com. Lots of resources for you to dive into that I think would be really valuable for you if you like free content and you're starting to turn your passion into a full-time business, or you just need to freaking dot your I's and cross your T's and get better. Lots of our mentees are making thousands of dollars a month after joining the group, after doing mentorship. So I would love to have you guys in there, and really cool. But I want to get into Robert's finding your why, getting clarity. So without any further ado, here's Robert J. Hill. Robert, so good to have you on. I've missed you so much, and you're a happy face to see during quarantine. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It is summertime in Portland. We just came out of a very long winter, so I'm in a happy place.
That's awesome. I feel like this year in general, everything's long. Like you're like, oh, that April was 87 days long. May was 106 days long. So no, that's really cool. That's awesome. Now, are you originally from Portland?
No, I'm actually originally OG. I'm from Seattle, but I kind of I was not there for a very long time. I left when I was 1, and I grew up in Florida, and so I always tell people like my energetic roots like grab hold of the Northwest and grabbed hold of the Northwest. And when I moved to Florida, there was always something off until I started my business, started to travel, and then I was like, I got to go back. And so I've been here for I think 7 years now.
Wow.
And so. Yeah,
that's awesome.
OG, I'm from the Northwest.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where, I mean, 7 years, man. That's like, living in DC. When I was here my first year, I was like, no, I'm not from DC. But now, especially as you meet new people, like, no, it's where I'm coming home to now. So even then, so that's really cool. What a quick question before we get into all the deep, fun stuff. Like, were you a photographer at all in Florida, or was that only in the Northwest?
No, I was definitely a photographer in Florida. Yes.
Give me the biggest difference, funny or not, or horrible, from shooting in Florida? We have a lot of Florida listeners. Some of my mentees are from Florida versus Portland. Yep. What does that look like for you, and what was that change like?
Golly, the difference.
I did not send him this question in advance, so we're stunting him right now.
Yeah. I also I want to make sure I'm going to say something that's not going to offend anybody, because for me, I have a lot of digs on Florida personally.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest difference, man, is everything. Literally, it's 180 degrees difference, even like temperature wise as well as like mindset wise. I remember the weather in Florida, and I've shot there. I still kind of go back often. My family still lives there. And so the weather there is definitely one of the biggest things. It's so freaking hot to shoot there, and not even just hot, but humid. And that's so difficult. And so the weather would be one, the culture would be another one. But I'd say probably the biggest thing out of it all is just the opportunities. Like, you really have to get creative in Florida to make something look different.
Yeah.
I grew up in North Florida in a really small town, Panama City. Probably the only people who know about it have been there for spring break. And Panama City is like white beaches, condos, and some rocks in the water. And that's pretty much it. And so when you're shooting 20 weddings a year, you're kind of like, okay, this is the same thing over and over and over. And it's just not a lot of diversity. And so in Portland, it's so abundantly diverse in terms of landscape and nature and flora and fauna and all the things that when I got here, like my mind just exploded with every opportunity that there is to go and shoot something different.
That's awesome. And I mean, it's like I had an old pastor that used to say this, and I know we both come from the church world, but it's like it was good advice. And it was like new place, new perspective, that kind of stuff. And like the idea of even going to Portland, even with you just kind of moving there, you're going to have like an almost because you're excited, you're going to have an aggressive take to finding more of that stuff and hunting down the culture, character, diversity, legacy, things that are happening and where you're at. Kind of the same way, like, I'm very cautious when mentees are like, oh, should I buy this piece of gear or something like that? I'm like, well, are you buying it because it's going to make you happy, which is cool, but like, that first week with having a new camera or a new lens, you're like, yeah, I love it, and then eventually it just becomes a tool, right? So it's that new fresh excitement, I think, in general, and then now it seems long lasting. So that's really cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, dude, I just want to hop right in. Some of your story, we've had you on the podcast before, was really, for people who don't know, Robert was the destination wedding photographer. I like to say before it was cool. But, definitely jet setting around, shooting the weddings, 4 or 5 digits, and having what looks like a time of your life. And as we had you on our last podcast, the super sad podcast, from all about depression, and but that's really what happened. It wasn't bringing, what I like to say is it wasn't bringing you fulfillment. You weren't fulfilled. You might have been making money, but other things suffered, and it delayed you finding this kind of like, whatever you call it now, but I would say like a purpose-driven business or a legacy-based business. So we've talked about that. You got out of that. Portland, hustling, shooting the local scene, really honing in on what you do. You're one of those guys that I feel like, knowing you personally and professionally, they match up pretty closely, and I think that's really, really cool. Like, you're an outdoor hippie loving mushroom guy, and your clients and your work also reflects that. I think that's cool in your purpose. And so bringing that all up to speed now, I think officially you're full-time education for photographers, small businesses, and you've been my mentor. I've been to a workshop before, and where we got to meet good people. Max, we just had on like 2 days ago again. Yep. And so all that to say, I want to stop talking, but I want to say, like, what does, one of the big things you've helped all of your mentees, because I know lots of them, was finding our why and finding our purpose and finding out why do we exist, and then aligning that to our business. So, like, big question, but what does that all mean? And then how have you been able to find that yourself first?
Yeah. I'll answer the latter question first, because I think that definitely bleeds into all of it for me. And I was actually thinking about this morning as I was driving to work, just about the last time that we chatted, that we did a podcast together. We were talking on depression. I was like, this is going to be a lot lighter than that one.
Hopefully.
And that was such a crucial season in my life. And for me, really, really short story, or long story made short. When I jumped into the industry, I jumped in just because I was passionate and I was happy and I was stoked, and I wanted to pick up a camera and have fun, and I wanted to travel. I wanted to make some money. I didn't really think I would make a lot of money. And then all of a sudden a lot of money started coming to me, and I was just like, oh crap, this is a thing. And that all took off really, really quickly. I wouldn't say it's too quickly. I think I would have said that a couple of years ago, but now I'm like, it happened exactly as it was supposed to happen. But I really went from kind of small town kid making $20,000 to $30,000 a year to making $250,000 within 2 years of my business. Yeah. And that's such a drastic life shift change, mindset change. Yeah. Throughout that 2 years, my entire foundation of my belief system shifted and changed. Traveling the world, like, you can't not become a more aware person if you continue to throw yourself into uncomfortable situations, and traveling the world can be very uncomfortable. Diving into other cultures, other currencies, other languages really teach you that you don't really have it figured out. And so with so much change that happened so quickly, I hit this point as a wedding photographer that I realized that I got to this point where I had, in the most cliche way of saying it, that I had really made my dreams come true. Growing up, I had always wanted to travel and do these things. And so when that all came to light really quickly, I was like, oh crap, I'm only 24, 25 years old. What do I do now? And when that question arose, I didn't know how to answer that. But then as well, the secondary question came into play of like, why am I doing this? And I couldn't answer that one either. And those were really challenging questions for me to go about answering going forward. And that led to my depression and my breaking and all of that. And through that process, I was able to find some clarity. And for me, I think it's a lot different than a lot of people. I started consuming content about why, and the content I see around why in the industry, but also in just the business world at large. It's very elusive. It's not clear in terms of like, how do you find your why and what do you have to do? And the famous Simon Sinek talk and everything. I feel like when I watched that talk, you could almost see how it was profound, but it was also like over people's heads. Like it didn't solidify. How do we use this going forward? How do we take action on this going forward? Yeah. It was just like, here you go. You're tossed into what I call the abyss, an infinite well of darkness, but you don't have a ladder to get out. And so for me, I got tossed into that well as I started to question that for myself. And I would even say that at that time, I was even pulling people into that well with me, I think at first, and not having the ladder of how to get out. And so there was a lot of struggles for me with friends, with other people I was working with at that time of just, well, how do we really answer this question? And then I finally started to figure out the ladder of how to get out. Because the question of why I find it to be so fascinating, because it is the smallest yet largest question and word in existence, right? Three letters that have an infinite answer to it. And so you can continue just to question why all day, but you need to be able to kind of answer that. And so it took some time for me to be able to answer that. And that's where your why is directly linked to your story. And I think that is where why it's such a big deal to understand why you do what you do, is because if you don't understand why you do what you do, it's just a reflection on the fact that you don't understand your story. And I think there's a bigger conversation there. Yeah. A lot of people don't believe that they have a story or that they have a story that matters. But every single individual has a unique story. And so as I've kind of been able to work through that with myself and through my own story and be able to craft that, and as well be able to help individuals do that. When you understand your story, you understand the foundational purpose of what it is that you're trying to do. And you have this motivating factor of why you want to show up every single day, and the energy that you show up with, because no one else has this story. No one else has what you have. Yeah. And I think that, there's so much that comes into this in terms of how do you create value for people, and how do you build something that matters and makes a difference. And all of that is going to be rooted in this deeper thing within yourself that no one else can tell you that that's what it is. It's something that you have to discover. But having somebody help you discover that is what I have found to be so powerful for all the people that I've worked with. So yeah. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. I feel like for us, that was, a big part for me was, there was a story there. Let's discover it. Like, what was, not just, I feel like it's how our parents said it, but it's like, oh, what gets you up in the morning or whatever. But it really is like, what is this thing that is your purpose? Like, asking the question of why do you exist? And something I harp on all the time on the podcast and, in our Facebook group is like getting past, at least of the photography portion, like getting past the, documenting couples in love mission statement. I'm like, guys, like, yep. That's, business wise, that's table stakes for what we all do. That's just what it is. Like, yep. But pursuing and going further and honing in, and it's more than marketing. It's more than your ideal client. It's literally like, is this fulfilling to you when your both ideal clients and the money and your purpose are like all lined up and they smash together? And like, is that, what you want it to be? And for so many photographers, especially, it's usually not. And especially, at least for me, I remember conversations where, as we got deeper and deeper into, my story, my why, what made me come alive, what kind of work brought me true joy and long-lasting joy, what did I want my purpose and legacy to be in my business, we use that as the rubric or the filter to go back and look at the actual visual work and say, Adam, does this photo really match up with what we're talking about, with what you talk about? Or is this just a pretty photo that feels safe, And that's something now my own mentees hate me for because we'll go through and, we'll learn more about them and they get really excited, or, obviously like myself, we might cry because this is a big thing to uncover all this stuff and unpack all this stuff. And then I say like, why do you have this photo up here? And they're like, well, it's just a venue that I like working at or whatever. I'm like, I feel like we've established now that there should be a deeper level, behind this. So I want to know, in your, years now of coaching other photographers, leading workshops, speaking, teaching, and working very intimately, mentorship in general, I feel like is a very intimate process, or can be, if it allows everybody to be as vulnerable as they could be, to really get that story or everything, because it's going to be sprinkled in everything you do business-wise and then life-wise. Mm-hmm. What has been the number one thing you think photographers miss when it comes to, finding their why, or finding out, their bigger purpose, if you will, when it comes to matching their work with their life?
I don't think that it's necessarily something that people miss. I think that it is I think that it's a process above everything. And I think that because it can be, depending on who you are and depending on what your life has been like up to this point, it can be a wildly uncomfortable process. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And I run a group mastermind as well as do one-on-one coaching. And it's been really interesting as I've started up my mastermind to be able to expand this back into a group, because I started with like a group setting years ago, and then I completely cut that off. I only did one-on-one, and it was because I really needed to deepen what I was doing on an individual basis. Yeah. And as I've opened it back up into a group setting, and we've started to work through these things together as individuals, but collectively as a group, your story it can be a very uncomfortable thing to uncover and to share. And so all of this is rooted in self-awareness. And what I've been thinking about lately is just that everyone's story is so different, and some people have a much more challenging story to overcome to the point where they can own it and to share it. Yeah. And so one of the things that I just went on a little trip down to Florida to kind of finally break out of quarantine and go see some family. And while I was down there, I was having some conversations with my mom and with my stepdad. And specifically, I was in this conversation with my mom just about how much gratitude I have for how open-minded she is to me. And I was also in a conversation with my mother-in-law about this as well. And something came out of my mouth that had never come out of my mouth before, that I thought, and that I've been really sitting with for the last couple of weeks, as I've just been working through what I was feeling when this came out and what this really means. But I believe that the depth of any relationship comes down to how open-minded the two individuals are. And that is really challenging when you come into this setting of wanting to own your story and share your story, because when you start to be able to do that, you're sharing your story, especially if you've never done this before, you're sharing your story with an audience that you don't know how open-minded this audience is. Yeah. You don't know where these people are at. And that's where this self-doubt, and this is where all of this stuff starts coming in. Fear arises. The wall that we have to jump over is this wall that's really keeping us from a more self-actualized self, right? A more realized self. And so a lot of the work that I do with people, when we get to this point, they may have a lot of struggles around, sharing this, is a really big thing to say, because, I don't know how my parents are going to take this. I don't know how my friends are going to take this. I don't know how anybody's going to take this. And by no means do you ever need to come out and share a story that will in any way affect somebody for the negative, right? We never want to do any of that. We always want to lead with value, and the way that we tell our stories needs to be crafted in such a way where it's going to be of service to the people we're sharing it with. But that's, I think, the biggest hurdle. It's not that people miss it. I think that maybe they dodge it. Maybe they see it. And some of my one-on-one clients, especially, I'll work with them for months at a time. And this idea of like, we've got to circle back around to your story. Like, we need to get this down. And what people miss is that without setting the foundation for your business, which why you do what you do is one of the elements, of this foundation of your business, if you skip over that, no matter what, you're eventually going to hit a roadblock at some point in your business as you're trying to do something where things aren't going to connect, things aren't going to land. You're going to end up having to hustle more than you're able to actually add value and work less and make more. But that's a big hurdle, inner world hurdle that we've got to jump over if we haven't been deeply empowered to jump over that. And so, so I don't think that it's something that people miss as much as something that people dodge subconsciously because of how uncomfortable it can be to really own who you are.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like vulnerable. You're doing this work, at least in our scenarios, for the sake of business, but it is such a huge reflection on you as a person and self-awareness and that depth, and that, there's so many people where there is fear or there is caution or there is hurt and pain, in their story, to finding out what that means for themselves, and really honing in on that. It can be like a super painful process, and figuring that out. I know one of my mentees, she was like, I just want everybody to feel loved and included. And I was like, when we got down to her why, it was because she, at times in her life, didn't feel included or loved. And, we're crying at lunch at this, random, and this is like a casual conversation. And I was like, use that as the fuel, for your business now. How much more do these photos that at a surface visual level do look like everybody else's, at some level, there's a bride in a white dress oftentimes. How do we make those matter more? One, to them as well. And the couples that we're going to connect with ultimately, that's the biggest thing that I feel like has helped me is, one, I'm not afraid for my photos to matter as much as my purpose to be felt when I'm working with my couples. It's and now it's getting to the point where like they repeat it back to me. They're like, I love the idea that you eliminate fear or want to create connection. That is really, really cool to me. And then, my goal as a photographer, getting really nitty gritty there, it's like, my goal is no longer to create cool photos. My goal is to create value in the work that I'm doing that aligns with that mission and purpose. And if that looks like, just a couple posing, having fun, but there's tons of epic, crying moments, or it feels authentic to them, or they want to be quirky or goofy, it's not for the sake of being quirky or goofy. It's for the sake of, they're being their most vulnerablest selves as well. And if I can photograph that, that's what matters. I never want to, photograph my clients after learning all of this and feel like I left something on the table, and be like, oh, I didn't go as deep as I could have. Like, that was just a photo shoot. Like, no, I want it to be this experience, to where I'm not just a photographer to them. Working with us wasn't just a photographer. Like, my sub goal is to be invited to Thanksgiving by mom. That's always my goal. It's like, oh, no, Adam's not just this photographer. Like, oh, he cares about our family's legacy. He cares about what's happening here. But all that to say, you mentioned the idea of like the vulnerability and the depth of a relationship is so important. And it's like both people, I picture like digging a hole and say, okay, we agree that we're going to dig this hole. And like every friendship is like, we're going to dig, but you have to like agree to keep digging and be okay with that, and we're both married guys. Just in that small section of a type of relationship, that's hard. Finding it ourselves and relationship with faith and politics and friendships and parents and all that kind of stuff is super, super difficult. But I don't know if this is lighter than last episode, man.
Hey, maybe not.
But no, I love it. I want to know, so we've gotten really deep and really meta really early. What does that look like for for photographers on their own, in the same way? I don't think there's definitely like here's a checklist, but what is that methodology? Where can they start with saying, all right, I want to find and they might say a true why, like not just the documenting couples. I want to go deeper. What is some self-reflecting tools, tips, ideas, books you've read, anything that is that next first step for them?
Yeah.
I feel bad.
We want to go to the light version or the deep version.
We got to go deep, Robert. This is your legacy. You don't leave anything on the table, man.
I think what's So a couple things here. One, I think that, and this is something I come back to because I think that any belief for me, I grew up with a belief system that was very rigid. It was very structured, and there was no jumping out of it. That was not allowed. And I've adopted a system now where I believe 100% what I believe until I don't believe it anymore. Until I become aware of something that shifts that belief, I'm going to fully own that belief. And that may be somebody coming to me and saying, hey, yo, maybe this is another way of seeing it. And so that's where that openness comes from. But something that I've been thinking about for the last several years is how the words I love you are really the most vulnerable words that we could possibly say. Because the words I love you are essentially saying that I am committed to engaging in this relationship with you, in which I am going to dig, just like you said.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easy to dig to a certain depth, and then you don't want to go any deeper than that, because to dig deeper than that is to work through some things that are within yourself. And every single person has this in them, right? Yeah. The layers of ego is how I always communicate it. We all have been conditioned to see the world, to identify the world, to believe that the world is a certain way. And we've all created our own perception of reality in that is dictated by ego, these layers of ego. And so when you get into a relationship with somebody, it's easy to have a very lighthearted surface level relationship, but the deeper that you go, the more that those layers are going to have to get ripped back up if you want to experience a deeper freedom in your life. And so I think that there's kind of two folds to this. One is the knowledge side of it. It's like the information side of it, but the information side of it, as you do that work, leads to awareness. Yeah. And I think that that's such a big thing that it's really easy to miss if you're not somebody who is aware of self, like within yourself. If you don't feel like that's something a concept that you fully understand, it's very easy to go through life seeking out more and more and more information, rather than going through the transformation of becoming a more self-aware individual for yourself and understanding yourself. And so process-wise, what that looks like, and the way that I coach people and support people through this is getting really clear and identifying what are the biggest life transformations that you've had in your life. What are the things that have the defining moments in your life? And sometimes these are one distinctive moment that we can pinpoint, but sometimes these are seasons that, we've gone through a massive shift in. And so identifying what the biggest transformations that have happened in your life. And for me, I always start with 3. So let's just identify 3 massive life transformations. And then take some time to sit in those, which is where this difficulty comes in. And the difficulty is just simply because our egos don't want that. Our egos are the resistance that we're experiencing every day. Our egos do not want to be ripped up and eradicated from self. And so our egos are what keep us back from even doing this work. And once you've identified those 3 life transformations that you've gone through, identifying what it is that you believed before those and what it is that you believed after those. What did you believe about yourself and the circumstances that you're in and your abilities in life before those events and after those events? And once you have that right there, that transformation that you've gone through is essentially your why. And this is where we're talking really, really big. And I always go really large at first, go after the biggest life transformations you've gone through. But this is every single story in every single moment of every single day could play a part into this. And so it really starts to become a conversation around presence and around awareness and around groundedness in terms of being right here, right now, and understanding that you do have the power based off of your own story and what you've gone through to evoke change in other people, and the depth of what those things are. And I think that this is one of the hardest things is I believe that the people who have gone through the hardest things in life have the greatest power to create the biggest change. But the people who have gone through the hardest things in life are the people who also have possibly the most unprocessed emotions within them, stored within them energetically, which create ego. And in turn, they have the biggest resistance of actually doing that work.
Yeah. Well, even that too, it's like, our body is designed to, hide from things that give us pain, right? So that's our ego, vulnerability, trauma, et cetera. So those hard stories that folks who have had the hardest times, it's one, a physical reaction that they don't want to have to dig up in there. But I think like with many things too, there's a beauty to it. There's a beauty to it. Even for myself, doing that work with you and on myself, like I could have never, like all the keys on a piano, I feel in tune, and my process is continuing to be in tune, but it's like finding your why is finding out what song you're supposed to play, or like what purpose you're supposed to have. And, it's going to sound bad on the way there. I like analogies. So it's going to sound awful on the way there, and it's going to feel weird and feel wrong. And, I know for a lot of people, it's like very painful. But one of the big things for us during a lot of our exercises, that I think if people are still trying to figure out like, okay, well, I get this, like, how do I actually do this, was, not just asking, me, why do I exist? But as we were diving deep into it, it was a little bit of, typical, let's find your ideal client. Like, why did you enjoy those weddings, or why do you enjoy those processes with them, or what about those situations brought you joy? But also too, asking, at least for me, it was easy for me to think of what I didn't like, or what I thought were injustices or whatever, and you said, what fires you up? Like, what pisses you off? Let's find out that. If you can't think about like what brings you true joy, and that really helped me as well, of like, okay, like what does rile me up? What does, make me upset? And I was like, man, for me, I hate fear. One, in the immediate practicality of a couple who, fear is holding them back from being their truest selves in these images. I hate that. They feel like they have to act in front of me, or we all have that friend where all their photos on Facebook is and oftentimes those might be fine, and I have those photos, but oftentimes, man, like, you can see the coping mechanisms as, for vulnerability happening actively. And I had to discover those for myself, but, so I wanted to eliminate those fears. And then creating connection was, my past, my upbringing, my, faith system, was because of a lack of knowledge, right? How could I use my business and my, efforts to, eliminate some of that fear and create the connection and say, hey, this is actually okay. I can vouch for this person, or I can vouch for this belief, or I can vouch for things down to, race or orientation, and say, guys, like, we've been doing it all wrong, like, trust me on this. And then help people become fulfilled. Like, how can I teach them, or how can I make wedding photography and photographing somebody, and if they're already their truest selves, not be something that's taking away from them, but is fulfilling and giving them life and giving them more, and them walking away not feeling like they did a chore, but that they got something. And so for me, that was such a huge thing. Whereas again, 2-3 years ago, I'd just be like, yeah, I like taking photos, it's cool, it brings in money. And it was still a cool story, but it was, again, it was, like I said, it like wasn't fulfilling. And it's like, what do I want this purpose to be? My why, because we run personality-based brands, a lot of us, my why for my business is my why for my life, Yep. And for a lot of people, I think that is, that's why the work is so hard, right? Like, to develop a brand and just say, Robert and I are going to develop a, Butterfly Creative, and Butterfly Creative aims to help, wonderful couples in love document colorful journeys of vibrant, exciting moments in their lives. And, we're going to go a little bit deeper because we have to do that work for ourselves. So,
well, and just to add to that too, because it's something that I had to learn along the way, because it's easy, especially when you first jump in. And it's so simple when you first jump in, right? You're just like, I have a camera. I want to capture weddings, or I want to capture couples. I want to capture love. Like, this clearly makes me feel good. I'm here to capture love, right? What I realized over time was that we all love to capture love, but at what depth do you want to capture love? And how can you do the work within yourself to love yourself more, and to become more aware of yourself more, to where you can help the person who's in front of your camera do the same. And that is for me, the foundation of experience. That's the foundation of value right there. Like, the way that you make someone feel is a mirror of how you feel. And until we become aware of, it's easy for us to just go like, oh yeah, the big distinction for me when I was going through my whole breaking depression season was, are you feeling good, or are you actually happy? And for a season I was chasing feeling good, but feeling good does not lead to long-term happiness. it's the same thing like dopamine and serotonin, right? Yeah. Dopamine makes you feel good. Serotonin makes you happy. Are you chasing more dopamine than you are serotonin? Are you eating the foods that give you the kick in the moment? Are you getting on social media to get the kick in the moment? Or are you taking that time disconnected? Are you taking care of yourself in a way that's very healthy for you to actually be more sustainable going forward? So, that was the big shift. And that's a lot of the stuff that I found that when we go to the deeper level of value, the surface level is you need photos taken. I'm a photographer. I've practiced my craft. I can take these great photos, but there's a deeper level of value that I don't see talked about a lot in our industry, at least. And that deeper level of value has such a bigger impact on the impact and the fulfillment that you're going to have. So for me, it's all about impact first and then income. Income's just a byproduct of impact. The deeper the impact you make, the more income you'll make. Yeah. And that's where, when we chase that deeper level of value, business just gets easier. You actually learn how to work less because it gets more effortless the more that you're actually focused on a deeper level of value than you are on the surface level.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the things too, kind of on that same vein of like, when you have this purpose and you believe this, you know your why, you're into, and you've done the work, and you're now like, you've got the traction and you're moving. We've talked about this, like, selling is no longer a thing, because you get to explain something like an engagement session or like an album with so much more depth because it aligns with what you truly believe, and the challenge is, like we've talked about, like, I have to do that work for everything that I offer, but once you do that, it gets easier, and so, like, it's always, I always say it's easiest for me to sell, basic, wedding photography, because I'm like, okay, yeah, we can go for that. And then that has to translate to everything, like the impact and the value of all of this stuff. So, and that, I think too, that's like, people, my main point with that was like, people are scared of being salesy, and it's like, no, like, if you have conviction, about something, it doesn't mean that people will say yes, but people will believe it, and if they are aligned with that, then then they'll give you all the money in the world. And if they're not aligned, then they're not for you, they're not at that place yet.
Yeah. There's a concept in business that is the problem solution problem.
Yeah.
Solution, problem, solution. Like, you can keep going, right? And I think as photographers, it's very easy to go, okay, we see the problem and we are the solution. But what's the next level of problem, and how are we solving that? And that's side of being salesy. And when I say this, like, I don't want this to come off the wrong way. And that's where I'm gonna completely lead with, like, this is what I've learned from myself, is that the only time you are fearing being salesy is if you don't fully understand how to serve. Yeah. And that's not to say, like, that's not a dig on anybody to say, like, oh, you suck at serving, right? But it's that to truly serve people in a really deep way, it takes you serving yourself in a deeper way. And the first thing that we do when we first jump into business, we aren't focused on serving ourselves. We're focused on, like, let's go, let's hustle, let's move. And it's very easy to create a habit out of that hustle mindset that isn't sustainable long term. And then you get to this point where you're just like, I'm exhausted, I'm worn out. And so it is a big mindset shift. And I see this with people, and even in the coaching realm or education realm, a lot of people have resistance to jumping into coaching because what they're looking for is they're looking for another system, or they're looking for another analytical tactic or strategy in order to get couples, rather than, like, let's understand who we are and let's actually show up from a place of service, to where we can actually add value. And then and there's a little bit of a I have an interesting relationship with the word faith, because I think that faith is the first step, but then faith shifts into knowing. And at first, before you get to knowing, you have to have faith. And I mean, we're doing this in all different areas of our life. Sure. But there's that little step of faith, that jumping off the cliff that's required for you to finally, like, understand that you can fly, And so, it's stepping into the faith of knowing, like, hey, if I just show up and I don't have any expectations whatsoever to the outcome of this conversation with somebody, and I'm here literally just to show up and add value, the way that those people are going to reciprocate from a spiritual perspective or from a human psychology perspective will always be 10 times greater than what they're going to do if you just came in analytically and just tried to sell them on something. And so I think that's the work though. That's the deeper work of okay, that we can't show up and sell. We don't need to fear selling. All we need to do is just show up and deeply, deeply serve people.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's obviously not the easier option, at least for Americans.
Not at all.
Yeah. It's like the difference between going to a fancy restaurant and, at least in DC, we've got 1 or 2 Michelin stars, and there's a difference between the waiter or the waitress showing you the menu and saying, what do you want, versus the chef coming out and explaining to you the value of this food and why he put these recipes together and why it's important and what does it mean to him. And, again, going to the practical business thing, it's very easy to see in that scenario, man, if the chef came out to me every time I went to the restaurant, I would pay a lot more. Man, what an experience for him to explain to me why is truffle oil so expensive, or whatever, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's, that's the thing that I think a lot of photographers, they just fear. I ask everybody who joins our group, what is their biggest struggle in business? And the number one thing is, conversion and leads. And, the biggest thing I've seen with my own mentees is at the very surface level is the why also just practically gives you this direction. And I see so many photographers, we've seen those websites, right? And even for myself, we talked about curating my portfolio was an act of finding my why or getting my why in tune with my work. And you just see so much aimlessness and a lack of, it's easy to say it's niching down, but it needs to be obvious. What is your core conviction? What do you want to say? You've got a lack of less than 1 second, only a few images. What can you say with your first impression, that somebody's coming to your site? And, I don't know. It's one of those things where I want to just shake them and be trust me, it'll be worth it. It's going to be worth it. It's not going to be easy, but it'll be worth it,
Yeah, man. I see that all the time. And I think I've gone through my own process of that as well, of just seeing so much of that in the industry and so desperately. And I don't feel like this anymore, but in my own self-leadership, I went through a season in which I wanted to save those people. And I wanted to just trust me, believe me, do this thing and you're going to be better,
Yeah.
But that's never going to, that's never going to actually create the change. This quote has literally just been in synchronicity with my life this week, and it keeps coming up. This Dale Carnegie quote that says that those convinced against their will are of the same opinion, still. And it's a process that in the industry as an educator, I have to see that. I have to watch that. I have to see the other educators and what it is that they're teaching and know that what those people are going through. And no matter what education you're getting, you're on a path and on a very specific path, and you're supposed to take that path. And I know we've had a lot of, I don't even know the whole story, but I know that there's been some blow up in the industry in the last few weeks with specific educators and a lot of people who have been hurt by those people. And that was a process that those people needed to go through. And I've had to step back and just watch that because some of those people, I know I'm going to have the opportunity to serve when it's time for me to serve them. But if I was to jump in and just go, trust me on this, you can't, believe me, come over here. It's not, they won't actually be able to fully grasp the depth of what it is that you and I are talking about here if they don't take it on themselves on their own journey and actually see their own transformation, because that's everything, right? You can't take this as analytical knowledge and just believe it. This can't be something that you convince somebody around. It's experiential. It's something that you have to feel from within, and it actually reflects from the inside out. And so, I think that's one of those things as an educator, as a coach, as a mentor, as somebody who's trying to serve other people in business, is that we can't save anybody. You have to be on that journey and do that work as you go within yourself, and then reflect that in the work that you do outside yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I know for me, it's it is harder to at first to do this, but it's the idea of just do your own thing. And if it is true and good, then it will resonate when it needs to resonate, and people will hear it, and it will come out. But it's at the same time, you have this good thing that you want to share with people, and you're hey, get on board, let's do this, whatever. But it's they have to see it. I think a lot of people have to see it or feel it or hear it or whatever. And, I know that was the case for me, man. Going to Miami, February 2017, 2018, I'm thinking, good weather. I'm going to eat all the seafood on my company's dime. I'm going to some workshop with this dude I've never met. And, cool, that sounds great or whatever. And then 2,000 words of notes later, I'm like, what is happening? And
what's my brain doing right now?
Yeah, exactly. And like immediately was like, I need to talk to this dude a little bit more. I was like, this guy, and we at least for us, and again, Robert, myself, we might not be the mentor for everybody by any means. We might not be the podcast or the workshop or whatever, but it's like, you got to find your person or find a similar, and again, we've talked about faith a bunch, but if you're in the Christian world, it's like your disciple or your discipler, like you find a person that like, for an extended period of time, you say, all right, I need to learn. And I'm not saying I'm going to obey everything, but I will learn. And then if you do obey, you'll adopt that system. And, it was, at least for me, I know we had a lot of good experiences and it was great. And it was so different from, it was such personal work. It wasn't growing your Instagram following. It wasn't, getting more leads. It wasn't getting more hits. It wasn't having more fulfilled clients. It wasn't getting more reviews, making more money. But because I did that work, all those other things happened. Right? Like my Instagram, I could always do a better job, but the number one comment I get, is that they can see my convictions, that they know what our team feels and where we sit, where we understand, who we believe. They understand that like our couples, no couple is often models, but like the fear that couples have going into a photography space, like we want to punch that in the face. And I think they feel that and they know that. And it's, it does translate, but it's scary, right? It's obviously scary, the practicality of all this stuff. And then like, I remember me like curating my portfolio or like on my site talking about why I felt fear of being in front of the camera, right? Like we're on camera right now and I seldom would ever want to do this, right? Like, but it's, I think too, in the business side and kind of like what we just talked about is like, if people know that you're resonating and you're connecting with this, then people who have felt that way or are feeling that way will also align with you, and it'll be an easy win, and that's the one thing too. It's like my relationships with my couples are just so much deeper. It's like, again, we talk about the photography is just the table stakes, right? Because the photos and the words meant something to them. The photos were like, wow, these are cool or whatever, whatever their taste is. But then their taste is a certain way because they're certain people. Right? Like that's the whole case too. And then they go, okay, yeah, this aligns and I feel it and this is awesome. And, there's no one else I would want to work with. And I think that's so cool. And it's, the proof is in the pudding too. Like this is the last thing I'll say, but it's one of my own mentees who we dove into her why, kept diving. We dove into her pricing, which, those two things are not mutually exclusive. We dove into that. And I said, like, who do you want to book? Who do you want to shoot for? What is the wedding going to feel like when you're there, knowing what you know now? And show that in your photos, show that in your words, be up, like go deeper than I just want to capture your love or I just want you to have fun, which are cool things. Like Robert and I like fun, but yeah. She messaged me and like a day or two later, she got that email, and it only takes one. It's like fishing, and then you catch your first fish and then you're into it. She got that first email that says, I read everything on your site. It resonated with me. I love you. I can't think of another photographer I want to work with. I want to be around. You're just somebody I want to experience and have in my life. that kind of level of email. And she texts me crying, and she's just like, I didn't know this was possible. I was like, oh yeah. You didn't think when you bought that, Canon T3i 5 years ago and you started whipping it around that you were going to change some lives or that your life was going to change. But it's like, this can happen. And again, the goal isn't 15 weddings or 50 weddings. The goal is fulfillment, and it's, I don't know. It's really, really cool. It's one of those things where, again, we're doing what we just talked about. Like, it's hard to do. We want to just tell everybody, please, like, get mentors and coaches and like do the deep work on yourself. And, I think it's, because this is just so, it feels good, not doesn't feel good. It brings happiness, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a couple things that came to mind as you were talking there was first and foremost, I think that, And the older I get and the more I realize I don't have a freaking clue about life, and that it's infinite in the expansiveness that you can learn and grow in. There's these quotes that are so cliche that continue to like deepen within me. And if anything, I had a really big shift about a year ago, because I've always been somebody who's really valued depth and like, I want to go deep, you know? And for the longest time I thought in a way, and I didn't do this consciously, it was just something that happened, that I thought depth was complexity. Depth was like, let me explain the thing that you don't know. And like, let's like put so many different ideas on this thing.
Yeah.
But depth is simplicity. And that's where some of these quotes that we hear growing up, they are so simple yet so profound. And one of the things that I've realized is you know, that quote of like, I don't even know what it is, but it's like the road less traveled.
Yeah.
And what I find in the road less traveled is that it's really saying go the opposite way that most people are going. And I see that in our industry. I see the masses going one way, and I only see a few people going the other way. Yeah. But the other people going the other way are just having exponential results in what they're doing. You know, yeah. And going the opposite way is uncomfortable because it's social proof. It's not making sense. Yep. Because wait, everybody's over here, yeah. and they're doing the thing, but what's going on over here, right? And it's uncomfortable to take that road less traveled. But I think that because I have the same with my own Facebook group. I have people who come in, and the biggest thing that they say is, I need more leads. I need to convert. I need to do all of these things, right? And I think that when you shift that, when you go the opposite way and you focus on connection before you focus on conversion, yeah. you have a much, much different result. Yeah. Because like you said, people want to connect. And if anything, I see that the collective consciousness of our world is shifting and expanding exponentially right now. Yeah. Thanks to, I think technology has a big part to play in that, just the connectivity of all of us all over the world, the fact that we can do this right here. Sure. But I think that's where the importance of mentorship comes in, is because when you can have someone above you who is not above you in terms of like, wow, you've achieved a whole lot more than me, or wow, yeah. your success or whatever, but like awareness wise, somebody who can actually help you become a more aware individual, and simultaneously then you can shift that and you can do that with somebody else. Having somebody above you and below you is the fastest way for you to grow going forward. Totally. Right. And so, yeah. And I think that with that, for anybody who's looking for a mentor, and this is I think this is the difference in what I find in mentorship and in coaches and in hiring coaches. Because when you start to dive into conversations with coaches, you're not talking about, you know, $1,000 for a workshop. You're talking about thousands of dollars to invest in coaching. Yeah. But the difference is that a coach, depending on their skill set and how long they've been doing it, a coach's job is not to tell you what to do, which is what everybody wants. Everybody right. who comes in to work with me, they're like, just tell me exactly what to do. And it's really difficult because that's what our ego wants. Our ego just wants the formula to run the system to be able to see if the result works. Right. Yeah. And you see this in the, you know, I see this just a really tangible example of this for me is like Facebook ads, right? Like you can jump in, you can understand how to run a Facebook ad, but if you don't have the awareness of how to connect with people through that ad, tell the story through that ad, add value through that ad, yeah. and communicate from that deeper place, then your results are going to vary, right? It doesn't mean that you're not going to get results, but the quality of results are going to vary. And so, I find that mentorship and coaching really comes down to, rather than you're diving in to have a private workshop essentially with somebody, you want to find somebody who's going to be able to draw out of you a deeper part of yourself, yeah. to be able to become a more aware individual, to do everything that you're doing more effectively going forward. And so the systems and everything are part of it. I think that that's important with mentorship. You want to be able to run systems. You want somebody who has had yeah. achievement, accomplishment, success financially, totally. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever. Yeah. But that's not going to come by somebody telling you more of what you should do, yeah. as much as they're drawing out of you the deeper side of what it is that you truly want and helping you align your path with that. And so, that's a big thing that I see in the education side of our industry, is that it's easy for us to run workshops and conferences and to really just dish out information. Yeah. but there's not a whole lot of transformation that happens. And that's where people get stuck. They get stuck in, I don't want to take action, or I'm stuck and I'm nervous, or I'm scared, or I'm scared of what people are going to think of me, or, what if I say the wrong thing, or whatever the case is. That's all fear built up. Yeah. And by having somebody who's really deeply interested in you as an individual and the fulfillment and freedom you feel, as well as the financial success, I think you need to have both. So
yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think it's any professional at a certain level, whether that be an athlete or, anybody who has studied a lot. Or I know for me, my background was I went to college on a full ride for guitar, for an instrument. And I think it really helped me learn the process of how to do something and get to a high level. But the philosophy behind it, you would play a song and have a certain technique or something, right? You'd see it, or you see an NFL player run a certain route, and you say, "Okay, I want to learn how to do that." And photographers, right? We want to. I want to learn how to use a prism, or I want to learn how to shoot elopements in front of waterfalls, right? But you talk to you talk to Maddie May, you talk to myself, you talk to the NFL player, and we're gonna know we can teach you that. But why? Why do we want to do that? Where do you, as a guitarist, where do I fit in space in the song? I'm using these techniques to prove my purpose, whatever the song is. At any high level, we have to transition ourselves from just being people who want to get a few more boxes to add to our task lists and then check them, and get away from that in the psychology of why am I moving forward? And it's hard to sell, right? It's so,
it is.
Max's workshop on ads was so easy to get 100 people to join the group, and you're yeah, learn how to do ads so you can make more money and get more leads. But how many people are going to watch or listen to this? But it's guys, 10 years from now, you'll still be thinking about Robert and I's conversation, and you'll either hate it or you'll be thankful for it. And I think at the end of the
maybe a little of both.
Maybe a little bit of both. And I think too, going back to what we talked about, we can't force anybody, we can't save anybody or anything like that. But I do think my goal with this conversation, this podcast, this live in our group and everything, is that this way of thinking is no longer a projection or a presentation. This is an invitation. And saying, Robert and I have done this work, and you're still continuing to do this own work in yourself, you talked about, having somebody above you.
Daily.
Yeah, and it's we would invite you to something fun, and the coolest is it won't be Robert or Adam's recipe; it'll be yours. If you do that work, it'll be your story and your purpose and your matter. So, man, we could just talk for another 17 hours. Just be Robert, how do you feel about tell me about mushrooms, all the types,
right?
No. But I want to know, what is the next step for people? My last and final question. They do some of this work, right? How do they start to translate it practically? We've given a few examples, but what's your next thing? Once you finally get somebody who is, in tune or getting in tune, they're feeling good, how do you help them apply that to, the other things that are going on in their business from a practical level,
Give me an example.
The small example, right, is sometimes as we learn our why and become more fulfilled, I know for you and I, something I always joke about with you is if you go to any sales workshop, they're going to say, hey, your email response to the couple initially needs to be short and readable on a phone. If you look at Robert's old email response to a couple or mine, it's 6 paragraphs about why this matters, the depth of what's happening here, an invitation to strangers to come join us along this ride, those kinds of things. And I'm not going to say one is right or wrong, but I think the idea of that's a practical change based on what they've learned. That's the obedience after the education. So I was wondering if there are other things like that you've seen that is that. What should people be ready for that they might have to change once they get upon their why? Oh, no easy questions here, Robert. No easy questions.
I think the bigger question, man, is what's not going to change. And I think that can be scary, right?
Come on.
Because you're just man, what would it be like to change everything? And I think that's where, another quote that comes to mind that I often think about is you're not tired, you're uninspired. And every time I get tired, I remind myself of that wow. Nope. You're missing a shift. There's a mindset shift that needs to happen here for you to be able to energetically elevate yourself back up to a place where you can actually start to take effective action again. And I think that the biggest tangible thing that I could say to anybody, and I think that what's difficult with this work is that I don't know, and I don't feel, and I don't think that you can actually do this work without surrounding yourself with people who are also doing this work. And I actually just before we jumped on, I sent an audio message to my coach asking him a question about like engaging with more people who are infusing consciousness into business, because it's just not something I see a lot in our industry, at least. And I will take 100% ownership on that. It's not something that I'm also seeking out. It's not something that I know I'm doing enough work in finding those people to engage with them and have these conversations. But I think that that's what the difficult part is that our thoughts, all of this comes down to awareness and above at the root level, the awareness of our thoughts. And it's so easy, and we've been conditioned to not be aware of our thoughts. And so when we're not aware of our thoughts, we are our thoughts. And so the minute we are our thoughts, we are immediately stuck in this specific mindset of thinking a certain way, of believing a certain way, of acting a certain way, because our actions are only a reflection of that being side of ourselves. And I think that that's the key, is that tangibly you want to find other people who are also doing this work. And I think that's it's such a, I think my hope and what I see happening in the world is I see that this is starting to take hold. And I think right now it's a trend. Like I think mindfulness right now is this very kind of vogue, like it's out in the world, and there's a lot of like, apps and things like that around mindfulness and meditation and these sorts of things. And I think that that's a great thing. Because that may just be the first step into that. But I find that the more that you're around people who are aiming to be self-aware, who are aiming to open their mind, who are aiming to not be rigid and triggered by the events of the world, by other people, by whatever the circumstances of life, the more that you band together as a community. And I think that, if anything, is where the world is shifting. I hope that's where the world is shifting, because it's just such a much more enjoyable way of living when it's like we are connected and we're all on this path of like realizing we've got work to do in ourselves, but we can support each other in that, and we can all elevate and grow, That's not an analytical thing that I believe is ever going to, I don't believe analytics and formulas and strategies are ever going to get us there, because those just send us in a circle constantly. And so I think above everything, it's slowing down every single bit of your life, slowing down your thinking, slowing down your awareness, slowing down your system, slowing down your emails, slowing down your phone calls, slowing down your photo shoots, slowing down the wedding days. Like slowing down is the only way that we can truly become more responsive rather than reactionary. And that's kind of the root of all of this. How responsive are we being? The more we learn the ability to respond, the more responsible we become. And that's so huge when it comes to building a business, because when you start to go, how do we scale? How do we grow? How do we make more money? How do we do all these things? My first question is, are you responsible enough to have those things? Yeah. Because if not, you can definitely hustle your way there, but that's going to crumble eventually. Yeah. Like or you're just going to hate your life, but you're going to like, I hope I can say this, but I always kind of put it on the spectrum of like the rich asshole versus the homeless hippie. Yeah. And like, you don't want to be either. You kind of want to just land in the middle. And I think that that's where this slowing down and becoming more aware of yourself above everything, that's going to be the key here. And so surrounding yourself with people, slowing down your process, and really trying to communicate value. And that for me is, I'm obsessed with the word value. I always want to make sure that I am leading with value. And I feel a very deep conviction around that as well. Like for myself, I want my life to be more valued. For me, I want to value my life more day to day, but I also want to create more value in this life for other people as well. At a very root level, because we're all going to feel better. And if we all feel better, we can all do what we want to do in a greater way, with more capacity, with more responsibility. And so, yeah, I would say slow down. I would say find people who are also doing this work, and and really question as you're taking those steps in your business, every single step of your system. And hopefully you have a system, every single step of your system. How can you slow that down and really kind of just question, am I adding value here? And can I add more value here? That's going to take time. It's going to take intention. It's going to take slowing down. It's going to take awareness to be able to do that.
Yeah. I love that, man. I think the one way it was explained to me too is just like asking why over everything. You know, every part of your process. You talked about it, and like people use the word like intentional, but like, why do you, even we'll just use easy, practical photo business examples. Like, why do you do engagement sessions? And not just oh well, tell whatever that reason is. Like, no, like why does it matter?
Yep.
And I think because it goes back to what you mentioned about people are told, hey, here's how to make, an extra 20K a year on using engagement sessions, whatever. And you're like, oh, well, 20K sounds great. Like, what would my life be like if I had more 20K in my life? But it's like, no, you have to figure this out for yourself, and like I was talking to Melissa Jill yesterday of Align Album Design, and she runs an album company, knows all the data about album sales and the process and best practices and all this stuff. And I just joked with her and played devil's advocate. I was like, what about people that don't sell albums? Like, and she was like, well, they have to know why. They have to know why either way, and I think that's the idea for sure. You have to believe in whatever you're doing, like truly, because I think then that overarching the whole purpose of this whole thing, what I found, that's the answer when people are like, what makes you different than other photographers?
Absolutely. 100%.
And you just go, me, like you just go, yeah, this is me. And there are people out there. There's a finite number of people, I think, out there that will align with Robert's story, my story, your story, if you're listening to this. And like, you have to believe that. And that might be 17 weddings a year. That might be 70 weddings a year. That might be, 100 touch points. That might be 20 touch points, and
yep.
But you got to do the work. You got to find it out.
Yeah. And if anything, like I often say, business feels like you're really just going in a circle. Like you're constantly having to learn and relearn and unlearn and relearn and unlearn and relearn again. And like, as you do that, I think that it's really easy to believe that business is linear, but business is layered.
Yeah.
And the deeper you go within yourself, the more effective you're going to be at your business. Yeah. And the more that you put yourself out there, the more challenges are going to come for you to deepen yourself. And I think that's why around album sales, because I see this often. I see people who come in, whether it's into my community, into a coaching session, into whatever, and they go, how do I price myself?
Yep. Yeah.
And it's like, we got a lot more work to do first. We got a lot more work to do first, because if you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing at a root level, why you exist, if you don't understand your root why in a way that literally when someone says, why do you do what you do? You can tell me in one sentence. What do you do? Why do you do this? Right? You want to be able to explain it in one sentence. And that one sentence may need to be unpacked more as people have questions, but you need to have laser sharp, focused clarity around one sentence to explain very clearly why you do what you do. And until you have that, I don't think that you can truly explain the why behind every opportunity, offering, product, service that you offer. Yeah. Because each of those are going to have an individual why as well that links back up with like the mothership of whys. Yeah. And so, so I mean, that's like home base, right? Like you have to take care of yourself before you take care of others. And the effectiveness that you'll have in taking care of others will just be a reflection of how you've taken care of yourself. And so, man, it's crazy. It's crazy. Just business and the misconception of business in the world and what we're taught from a scholastic point of view of like, I wrote this thing a year or two ago just about like, what is a business? I feel like it's such a simple question. And when I dug into that and I started to unpack the definition of business and these things, value is not in the definition of business. It's like you do something to make money. If you get better, you make more money. But there's a missing element of value here. And if you don't understand value, if you don't understand how to communicate why, then your business will forever be limited in what you're actually going to be able to do. And that will be enough for some people. And that's totally cool. Yeah. Some people are going to want that, and that's fine. But if you're somebody who is actively trying to grow, actively trying to do something bigger and better and more expansive in terms of impact first, it's going to come up eventually, whether you like it to or not.
I love it, man. Dude, so good to have you on. Where can people go if they want to find out more Robert J. Hill stuff? What is the Facebook group? What are there anything you're offering right now that people can nibble on, can go for right now? What does it look like?
Yeah. I've got, so first and foremost, I would always say go after free content before you go after paid content. I have 20 plus hours of free content in my Facebook group. It's called Work Less, Make More. I think it's facebook.com/group/worklessmakemore. So that would be a great place to go. My website is education.robertjhill.com. Instagram is @RobertJHill. Or if you are ready to dive in and just immediately start getting support around this work, my next group mastermind is running July 1st through September 30th. And so there's an opportunity there as well, if that's something that people would like. And you can come and shoot me a message or come join the Facebook group. And there's more in there about that and how it is that you can get involved.
Boom. I love it. Hit Robert J. Hill up, say hi. Thank you so much, man. It was great to have you.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Well, there you have it, folks. One of the guys who influenced my life and business in the last 2 years tremendously. Our brand, everything has shifted for the better, I believe, by getting clarity on our why. And our clients are happier, my business is better, and the results speak for themselves. Like our revenue has now, tripled in April during a pandemic, which is crazy. So he helped me a lot. And I would invite all of you guys to, whether through mentorship with Robert, myself, or you're a book person or a workshop person or a conference person or whatever, get clarity on your why. Why do you exist? Why are you a person in the world? 1 in 400 trillion chance of being born you and not a tree. Why do you exist? What is your purpose in the world? Love going deep with Robert about that. Be sure to join our Facebook group, togfb.com. Get lots and lots of access to free workshops, all of our free lives when we go live with podcast guests weeks and months in advance before they come out on the podcast. So we'd love to have you there. And it's a community where you can go talk to like-minded people about the struggles, triumphs, and everything you're going through, which is really, really cool. And we just put a lot of bonus content into there. So togfb.com. Love you guys. Thanks so much. Keep being awesome.